In one generation in America, I went from being a boat baby refugee. I came here at 2 years old, and now I work for NBC News.
Absolutely.
There are very few countries in the world where someone with my background could be in a position like this today. It's important that we encourage representation in media because it is a highly visual place to be a role model for the next generation and to show that diverse voices and people who look diverse can come to the table and contribute to this country. I think what makes America truly great is our diversity.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Asia Forward. This is a podcast series highlighting forward-thinking ideas on U.S. Southeast Asia business. I'm Ledy Simarmata, your host today, and this episode will be a little bit different because we're going to start with an incredible personal story, a story that also illustrates how culture and representation influences how people, including Americans, view and understand Southeast Asia. Joining me in the studio today is Vicky Nguyen, NBC News anchor and chief consumer investigative correspondent, and also the author of the book Boat Baby. In her book, she shared her family's journey from Vietnam to the United States and how that powerful experience has shaped her life and career. Welcome, Vicky.
Lady, it's such a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I've been waiting for this day to see you. I've read your book. I finished your book actually quite a while ago. And there are some chapters in your book that just brought me to tears because it's such a moving, courageous, brave story of your family and you as a little baby. So just now, looking forward now, many years now you are here in the United States.
Yes.
How do you see that story today?
I mean, I still think it is one of bravery and courage, and all the credit goes to my parents because I was just a baby, and I think I was the catalyst for their decision to take that risk and escape Vietnam in the cover of darkness and risk everything and leave behind most of their loved ones because they had me and they thought, we don't want to raise her in this country where she doesn't have freedom, she doesn't have agency. We want to go to America, where they truly believed it is the land of the free and the home of the brave. And my dad was a medic in the South Vietnamese Army. And so he had fought alongside Americans and obviously was on the losing side of the war when the North Vietnamese won. So that was April 30th, 1975, the fall of Saigon. And, you know, those indelible images of people fleeing the country at that moment. But I wasn't born until 1978. And my parents didn't make the decision to leave until 1979. So they had already been living under the communist government for several years. So they had a sense of what my life would look like. And they didn't want that for me. So I look back on that decision now. Everything, every accomplishment, every piece of who I am is because of that choice that they made.
Yes.
And I think I recognized that at a pretty young age. I remember going back to Vietnam when I was in 6th grade, and it was just back open to having, you know, Vietnamese overseas coming back to the country. And for me, it was a life-changing moment as like a little American kid, basically coming back to Vietnam and understanding how different my life would have been if my parents had raised me there. I met all my little cousins and they were happy. They were going to school. It wasn't like they had bad lives. It was just, I recognized how many more opportunities I had growing up in America. And I remember thinking like, I don't want to take my life for granted. Like I really got to make the most of myself. And I think that visit back home when I was young really did impress upon me how fortunate I was.
Right. I'm now very tempted to just, this is her book, by the way, you should get that. There's a paragraph in this book and I marked here this because this is just such a powerful paragraph. If I can just read this to you and I just want to know what you think. This is a statement from your father. Not a statement. This is what your father, you know, shared with the family. This is you and your family when you were in Bidong Island waiting to the next destination.
Yeah, we were at the refugee camp. So when they left, they spent 2 days and nights on the South China Sea, survived a pirate attack, and then landed.
That alone is like a movie. Oh my God.
I know. I mean, hearing the story back from my parents and how they tell it and just, you know, my parents.
And how brave your parents were, you know, protecting you.
Some of it is the luck of the draw.
Oh
like
God,
the
I
fact
almost
that we
cry
were
now because
lucky. And it was a common situation for a lot of Vietnamese boat people to encounter Thai pirates on the open waters because they knew people would be carrying gold, they would be carrying money, they would have their valuables with them. We were an easy target and so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And my parents, when they tell that story, they're such glass half full people. They're so sunny side up. They're like, well, at least nobody got thrown overboard. At least nobody was sexually assaulted. At least nobody was killed. You know, they look on the bright side, which is we survived that encounter. People lost jewelry, you know, they lost money, but they allowed us to continue on to our journey to Malaysia.
Yeah, this is you waiting with your family. You just talked to the UN officer in Bidong Island. And then your dad served with the South Vietnamese army, obviously fighting on the same side with American troops. And then this is what he said. This is in a meeting, family meeting in the shelter. America is best, my dad said simply. Bigger and better. We wait. He had developed this belief from witnessing American military regiments during the war and years of reading about the land of the free and the home of the brave in newspapers and magazines. He had an unwavering belief that the United States of America was the number one country in the world. If you can just, you know, like paint me a picture, did you ever have that conversation again at home about your father's view, why he thought about we should go to America? Did you ever, as a family, you know, go back to that time?
I mean, I think we live it and we appreciate it every day. The other day, my mom was just commenting on how nice it is to have running water. And I just love that that is her attitude after this many years in America, 40 plus years in America, that she still appreciates things as simple as running water because that's what makes you have an attitude of gratitude. And I think that's what leads to hope and faith and believing that better days are to come so that when you are having the inevitable downsides, challenges of life, when you're struggling, which happens to all of us, you're able to celebrate the small victories. And that is, we got up this morning, we're here together, we have our 2 feet on the ground, we're able to walk here, you know, the sun is shining. When you're able to break life down into the moments that you are grateful for, then it helps you get through the tough times. And my parents went through a lot of tough times, you know, and I think that they set that example for me. And so we do talk about, you know, how fortunate we are, but I think we also, like, that's the life we live, is trying to make sure that we're grateful for what we have, that we're trying to make our little piece of the community a better place. And so, yeah, that passage is in response to the fact we could have gotten off of that refugee
to other places
much sooner. We stayed in Pulau Bidang, Malaysia for 10 months waiting to be sponsored to America. But in that time, people were being sponsored to France, to Canada, to Australia, to Belgium. And I just think, oh gosh, what my life would have been like had my dad said, yeah, okay, we'll go to one of those other countries. But for him, it was important that we wait, because in his mind, the whole reason we escaped Vietnam was to come to the USA. And my family agreed. My mom, of course, supportive of that, right? And so we did wait. And I think that what's remarkable and why the book is called Boat Baby is because in one generation in America, I went from being a boat baby refugee. I came here at 2 years old, and now I work for NBC News, which is an incredible network. It's an American institution.
You are there.
And, you know, I think there are very few countries in the world where someone with my background could be in a position like this today.
Yeah. And I know I'm talking to you right now, but if I had the privilege of talking to your father, do you think that if you look at the United States today, do you think that he still firmly believes about America just like the way he believed it years ago when he came?
100%. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. They are, you know, they appreciate the capitalist mentality of America, right? That if you work hard, you apply yourself, that you can make something of yourself. That if you have a great idea and you can, you know, ask the right questions and pursue the resources, that it's there for you, right? And so it's not that they didn't face discrimination. It's not that it was easy. It's not that people didn't say no to them all the time, but they knew what it was like coming from a communist country to coming here where, you know, if you want to run a food truck, which is what they did, if you want to learn how to be a blackjack dealer, which my mom did, if you want to wash dishes, which my dad did, if you want to open a furniture store just because, you know, your friend did, these are all things you can try to do, you know, and they did it.
Right, right. I know you share a lot in your book how you navigating American culture, being in American school, being in American neighborhood. But if we can just share with our viewers right now, what is the most challenging one that you felt personally in all that journey navigating America as somebody who come from Vietnam?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, right? Like in Northern California, mostly in Sonoma County, because we first moved here. We were sponsored by a family in Eugene, Oregon. Then we moved to Reno for a brief time. And then we were in San Jose, California. But eventually, Sonoma County was where I mainly grew up from third grade to high school. So back then, there weren't a lot of Asian people in Sonoma County, let alone Vietnamese people, let alone refugees. So I think growing up, one of the toughest things was just finding my identity and how did I fit in? Because when you're a kid, at least for me, that's the one thing you really want, is you don't really want to be different from your peers.
That's the time you want to discover yourself.
Yes.
Sort of, right? Find yourself.
Find yourself and fit in. For me, it was really about just making sure I had friends and I wasn't too different. Like my food wasn't too different. My clothes weren't too different. My name wasn't too different. My given name is Ing, but I eventually changed my name to Vicky in like, I don't know, it was like second grade because I just felt like it was too hard for everybody to try to say my Vietnamese name and they kept saying it wrong. So I just decided to go with an American name. And when I tell that story to my American friends, they're like, what? Your parents let you change your name? Because here people put a lot of emphasis on the name that they give their child. But my parents were very progressive in the way that they thought, well, if it makes your life easier to be called Vicky, we don't care. Sure, go right ahead. Because to them, I'm always going to be Ing. I'm always going to be their daughter who they named. It doesn't matter what the outside world calls me. And I appreciated that because my parents were not traditionalists in a lot of ways. They were very open to me kind of explaining American culture to them. Like, hey, this is why we do sleepovers. Or, hey, this is like what an American birthday party is. Like, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese. There were just things that my parents, they knew that their expertise was in working hard and kind of building a life for us. And they let me kind of just go to school. That was my job, and figure out the American side of things. And so I think we kind of both grew up together in a way and learned how to be American together. But I was an only child. So I think it was hard to find my place in like my peer group being so different.
And then fast forward, you are now in one of the major television networks in the United States, get into journalism. Also, you shared that in your book, how you get into journalism. But that powerful experience that you shared about your background and then you navigating the new life in America, does that has an influence in your storytelling style or in the way the reason you got into journalism?
I definitely think that everything that I am, I bring to my job. And I recognize that it's really important for people to know that you are authentic when you're telling the truth, that you're reporting facts to the best of your ability. And I think there is this idea that journalists are completely unbiased and that they have no opinions and feelings, and that's the way to be a journalist. And I always challenge that notion because the fact is, I am a woman, I am a mother, I am Vietnamese American, I have had so many experiences. I'm a Californian who's also lived in Arizona and Nevada and Florida and now New York. All of the experiences that I have, I bring them to the workplace and I have to account for them. That is not to say that when I tell a story that I'm only telling from my point of view. I have to recognize my own bias and the things I bring to the table. And then I want to compensate for that. I want to make sure that if I'm telling a story and I might feel a certain way about it, who might feel differently than I do, and make sure those voices are in the story. So what I bring to my job isn't just the fact that I'm Asian American, it's all of the life experiences that I've had. I also do think it's important that we encourage representation in media because it is a highly visual place to be a role model for the next generation and to show that diverse voices and people who look diverse can come to the table and contribute to this country. I think what makes America truly great is our diversity. And so just by the virtue of me being on NBC News with my last name, which is like the Smith of Vietnamese last names, if that inspires someone, encourages someone, lets someone know, oh my gosh, look, she is doing something I want to do, then that's enough for me. And so
that is powerful.
I try to bring that awareness all the time, right? And like the types of stories that I pitch, the guests that I have, the experts that I consult, I want to make sure that I am looking for all kinds of people to spotlight and to platform because I am in a position of public service and I have a really big platform to use through NBC News. And I want to be really responsible about the people that I put on television.
Now, I want to follow up on that. Talking about representation in the media. Media means can also be narrative in the news or entertainment, right? Or contents that we see every day here in the United States. Do you have a view on representation? It can be specific to certain industry or certain type of content about representation of Southeast Asia in today's American media.
Yeah. There's not enough of it. I think that it's
Tell me.
Yeah, there just isn't. There just isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to see the moment that Korean culture is having right now, from K-pop to K-beauty to K-barbecue.
I'm a fan of K-pop.
Who isn't? Who isn't, right? Like, it's like the planet is a fan of all of these things. And I love to see like the movies and the shows. Yeah. And, I love that. And I'm looking to see that for Southeast Asians as well. I would love to see the next sitcom about an American family to be based on a Vietnamese American family. Right. We've seen Chinese American culture represented with Fresh Off the Boat. Yes. We've seen,
There's Crazy Rich Asians.
Crazy Rich Asians, Singaporeans, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So I just think it's time, but I also, because sometimes I'm like, why aren't we seeing like all the great Vietnamese American culture being represented in our media? And then I recognize like, we actually haven't been here that long as a community, if you think about it. Vietnamese Americans have been here, since 1975. That's not that long ago. And so, I'm impatient. I would love to see more representation. I think it's coming. I'm glad that when my daughters turn on shows that they're seeing, Never Have I Ever, that Mindy Kaling show, which was so great and really brought Indian American culture to the forefront. But also it was just a story about a teenager living in Southern California, dealing with all the things that teenagers struggle with. That's why I think Mindy is such a genius, because of the way she wrote it. It was so funny. There are familial themes. There's the mother-daughter relationship, things that are universal that we can all relate to regardless of our culture. Yeah. But then there was a nod to Indian culture as well, with, the cuisine that was depicted, the religion that was depicted, how they ate with their hands in the dinner table scenes, like subtle ways of just making sure that our culture is out there for people to understand, to appreciate, to share. Because I think that kind of representation is what helps to heal the divisiveness. It helps to humanize, your fellow American citizen. And it creates conversations that we should all be having and not be scared to ask questions about. So I say all of that because I think it is important for us to see it so we can be it, and for us to also appreciate how wonderful it is that we live in a place where you have so many people who want to come here and bring their culture and their ideology and their religion and, their values, because it just enriches all of us.
Right. That's great, Vicky. By the way, guys, if you enjoy our conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Asia Forward channel here to follow every episode of Asia Forward podcast. In NBC, you are the chief for consumer investigative reports. And I just want to, touch on that a little bit, because the tagline is news that you can use.
Yes.
I keep seeing that.
Yes.
So just give us a glimpse of how's the decision making when you chose a story for your audience? Just tell us about the day in, day out of that.
I mean, I feel so blessed that this is my beat, consumer, because consumer really touches on everything. It's healthcare, it's your money, it's technology, it's really anything that you consume as a person can be part of my beat. And so it's nice because it gives me a lot of different topics I can cover. This morning, for example, we were talking about the rise in surcharges. A lot of people are feeling like, gosh, every time I turn around, the airlines are charging me more for my checked bags. Restaurants are saying, hey, if you use a credit card, we're going to have to add 3 to 5% to your bill. Even hotels and resort fees, it just feels like we're getting, nickel and dime to death with these fees. So what can you do about it? And so I have some solutions, like maybe carry cash and pay when you can. It's okay to let the business owner know that you're not happy about the fee. And over time, that feedback can add up, and maybe they'll remove the fees. Patronize other businesses, lobby the credit card companies who charge these high fees to the merchants, talk to your state attorney general. I think what's really important, and what I try to do with my stories, is identify an issue, but also empower people to understand the solutions.
Did you ever pick up, maybe this is not in the area of consumer market, but we know Vietnam as a country is one of the highest growing economically. The growth is fantastic.
I love seeing it.
I'm sure, yeah, of course, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. So
Yes.
that's how they name it, the VIP, Vietnam,
Mhm.
Indonesia, the Philippines.
I haven't heard that before. I like that. VIP. All
The
right.
VIP
Yeah, I love
countries.
it.
So
We're part of the VIP.
Indonesia and Philippines.
Very
because
cool.
the economic growth and the future growth that we probably will see. So do you have any view just looking at Vietnam today, as a country
Yeah.
from economic side?
I've been so lucky that I've gotten to go back and visit Vietnam, and I have seen the evolution dramatically.
Yes.
Right? When I was 11, there were parts of Vietnam that we went to and visited, like my family in villages where we didn't have running water, and you had cold waters for showering, and you didn't have toilets. You had the like outhouse with the hole in the ground and the two little steps for the sides. So, and no air conditioning. To, a few years later when I came back as like a 14, 15-year-old, that it had already changed so much. Like we had air conditioning. And then when I went back and I was older in like my 20s, suddenly there are malls, all the brand names are there, all the fast food chains have come, and there's theme parks. I mean,
manufacturing, products.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the tourism industry was like alive and well and strong. And I love to see that kind of growth in Vietnam. I hope they can maintain and preserve its natural beauty as well, because it is such an incredible place. Like all the coastline, the mountains, the jungles, Ha Long Bay, this cave that they just discovered there.
Yep.
And so my hope is that as they industrialize, that they also pay careful attention to maintaining the natural beauty of Vietnam. For people who don't know, I mean, it's about the size of California, right? Like it's kind of a similarly shaped long coast and whatnot. And I just think it's an incredible place. And so I'm happy to see the growth. I'm happy to see that it is like economically thriving, and that it's a place where we're seeing a lot of manufacturing go as, companies shift where they have their products made. I see a lot more
going in,
made in Vietnam labels now, which always makes me really proud. So I'm really happy. And I think that has a lot to do with the people of Vietnam, the optimism, the entrepreneurial spirit. Like I think Vietnamese people are predisposed to being positive for the most part. There is like an actual, I need to look up where this stat came from, but they said that Vietnam is one of the most optimistic countries globally. And I was like, I've always talked about that, but I didn't know there was data behind it. But I believe it because of all the Vietnamese people that I know and I've come in contact with and everything that people have been through in that country. And yet they're still super welcoming to investment, outsiders, people coming to appreciate the country and visiting. And, and so I'm happy that I come from that lineage.
Right. And you see the journey, from what Vietnam was when you left Vietnam to Vietnam today.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That's an incredible journey in itself.
And if I were born there today, I'm not sure that my parents would leave. They might have a very different view about what my future could have been. But that wasn't the case 47 years ago. So yeah. So I think like now I hope that the prospects for Vietnamese are even better. And I think that they are. I definitely think it's a country where you have a lot of young people who are educated, who could use more jobs and more access to like careers. I feel like that's a struggle anywhere, but for the most part, I think things are going well.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah.
Very well. Do you think, do you ever pick up any misconception about Vietnam today? That maybe Americans thought that's Vietnam, but it's actually not Vietnam.
Yeah.
Any misconception that you spot?
I definitely feel like for a long time, Americans thought they wouldn't be welcome in Vietnam because of the Vietnam War. I remember feeling that way and hearing that sentiment a lot more 20 years ago or so. Lately, I'm shocked at the 20-somethings that I meet at NBC News, and like a lot of people who I talk to are like, oh, I went to Vietnam on my honeymoon. Oh, I'm going to Vietnam with my girlfriends. Oh, we're like, I went to Vietnam. Like, it's just really interesting to me because this generation, I would say like the Gen Zers, like are really familiar with Vietnam as a destination like they would be with Japan or Korea. It's a place that they want to go and visit. They've heard a lot of positive things about. There are a lot of tours. So I feel like the relationship with Vietnam and America has grown much closer. And because also politically, it's a positive relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that I think opened the doors to people realizing, oh, it's not just this war-torn country where, foreigners aren't welcome. They've been, and then the word has gotten out that the food is great, the people are kind, beautiful natural resources, and it's relatively affordable still to visit. It's a great time to go.
Yep.
So I'm really happy to see that misperception has changed because a lot of people I think thought that Vietnamese had majorly bitter feelings towards Americans. And I would hear from veterans too, how happy they were when they returned and felt so welcome.
In the first episode of Asia Forward, I interviewed Frank Lavin. He is a former U.S. Undersecretary for International Trade. This is the general topic why we should look at Southeast Asia, right? And he gave his view, and maybe some obstacles that we can manage, but maybe it's there, which is a perception side of that, and distance is a factor too,
right? Sure,
because it's pretty far.
It's far, yeah,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, like, New York, Indonesia, not an easy flight. Right. It's a very long flight. So maybe we can encourage direct air transfer and something like that.
Definitely,
because people to people interaction is very powerful when it comes to shaping perception.
Absolutely.
So is there anything you want to add regarding like why Americans should look into Southeast Asia for whatever reason, or businesses should look into Southeast Asia for their growth?
Because it is such a capable workforce. It is a positive workforce. And yeah, it's far away, but like I think that a lot of companies who have invested have gotten a great return on their investment. I think the data is there to support that.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a logical place to expand to. And I think like culturally too, there are a lot of things that align between Southeast Asia and America actually. People in Southeast Asia love freedom. They actually love capitalism. They love opportunity. I mean, I think people love that kind of thing everywhere. But I think that sometimes you have religions that can clash or things that, make it difficult for two cultures to do business together. I don't see that same friction when it comes to the US and Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Obviously, the mission of this podcast to encourage people to look into more, Southeast Asia and bring out great story about Southeast Asia to American audience.
And to your point, visit.
Yeah,
the proof is in the pudding. Go there and see how you feel when you're there.
Yeah. That makes a lot of difference when you go to the country and then stay there and then explore, and then you come back with a whole probably different perception compared to when you left.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even do that without even having to leave this country, right? Like Orange County, San Jose, California. There are Houston, New Orleans. There are actually huge enclaves of like where Vietnamese people live, right? And you can see Little Saigon and you can get a sense of how people are. I mean, obviously those are Vietnamese Americans, but at the same time, that's an easy way to get an introductory lesson into a culture.
Yeah. And when it comes to making decisions in businesses, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of business executives, or people who run business, do business, trust is very important. Like their perception of something is powerful in influencing where they put their money in.
Yeah.
What to source, where to source, who to partner with, right? Can you maybe share from your side of as a business journalist of this, like how perception just like literally is a powerful thing when influencing businesses making decisions?
Those impressions are so important. And I think that's why I'm lucky to be in a position where I get to meet a wide variety of people in a wide variety of industries. And I can see the commonalities and what makes certain people successful. And I think what it is, has to do with the ability, like you said, to trust someone. It comes from their authenticity. How genuine are they in that interaction? Do they seem like they know what they're talking about when they speak with you? And so I think those are things that actually people make snap judgments right off the bat, right? And so those are things that you can lead with. If you know what you're talking about, if you have a business proposal, pitch, idea, like be direct with it, right? I think people can detect that authenticity right off the bat. So I'm glad that I've gotten a chance to work and talk across a number of industries with industry leaders. I think a lot of it is that personal interaction.
Yes.
But I do think the internet has helped make the world such a smaller place.
Absolutely.
Like you can get a really good feel for a country or a people from YouTube videos and people's own like social media accounts.
Yes.
Some of that's curated, you got to look at a bunch of different sources so that you're not being like fooled by one curated feed. Yeah. But if you've had enough encounters and they've been positive enough, then that helps you to paint the picture that you need.
Now we want to look. This is Asia Forward, so we want to look forward to the future, forward thinking, Asia forward thinking. We talk about your story, powerful story, leaving Vietnam, going to the US, and now you are in the US. And then we talk about just how incredible the journey that Vietnam has, now has been going on, now becoming one of the economic powers of Southeast Asia, and the relationship between the US and Vietnam. How do you want to see US-Vietnam relationship 5-10 years from now? How How do you have a view of hope for that?
I pray that it will continue to grow as much as it has exploded over the past few years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it really opened the doors to businesses and investment. And then I think that the results really spoke for themselves. And that's really kind of what it is in business, right? It's referral, it's word of mouth, whether it's from a customer standpoint or a factory or, like a mega conglomerate point of view. When you say, we're doing really well in Vietnam, we like this, this, and this. And, we set up these factories, or we have this really motivated workforce, and this is a great return on our investment. That spreads like wildfire. And I think that we're seeing in the financial charts and the growth that it's worked out very well. I mean, resources are not finite, right? But I think if you're smart about these relationships and the symbiotic nature of like, we benefit, they benefit, like everybody is winning and the consumer is winning because the products are high quality and they're being produced at an affordable price. Then I think that's what I hope. And I hope that like there will be more normalization. I know a lot of people who've actually moved to Vietnam, right? Like Vietnamese Americans who've retired there.
Even I know somebody in person. I know a techpreneur. Yeah. He's not Vietnamese. He built 2 companies in Vietnam simply because the ecosystem is right. That's amazing. That makes me so happy to hear that the ecosystem is right and that people are bringing opportunity, because that's why I have such high regard and respect for anybody who is a small business owner or an entrepreneur. You've gone and created something where nothing existed before. You're creating jobs for people. You're creating, a contribution to the economy that didn't exist before. So if you can go and do that in another country and bring back some of those successes to your home country, or you make that your new home country, I mean, everybody wins when you add jobs and you add opportunity to a country, right? To a people. And I think that that's happening there. And I really do hope 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be even more, because I think there's a lot of growth and potential ahead as well. Yeah. My really last question, is there any particular message that you want to share to U.S. businesses now that looking into place to invest? This is specific to people who do business, run business, have a product. Yeah. Maybe they want to find a partner. Yeah. Find these groups of business community. Is there any particular message about Vietnam that you want to share with them? Don't overlook Vietnam. It is a fantastic place. The people are wonderful. And it's a little bit far, to get there. But that is, I think, a small sacrifice given the massive upside. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Vicky. Yes. This has been a very, I've been waiting for the day to just say like how powerful your book is. And I think the reason I brought this book is because a lot of people in America today probably can relate to this story in their own way. Absolutely. Even though they didn't come from Vietnam. Obviously I'm not Vietnamese, I come from Indonesia. But I was like so moved with your story, because it's a story about people who just believing in the better life. And then Southeast Asian, like you said, we are, resilient. Right. And it's so well represented, in this book. So thank you very much for writing this. Thank you, Ledy. I really appreciate your response. It's everything I would hope. The best part of having a book is when it's out in the world, in the hands of readers, and they respond to it in the way that you could only dream that people would connect. And I think it does connect to a lot of us. I've heard from Lebanese people, Greek people, Italian people, Irish people, and of course, all my Asian people, because at some point, like our families came here from somewhere for a lot of us, right? We're boat people all in some way. And so to see these universal themes of what it means to be in a family, to overcome struggle and strife, and to be resilient and to have faith, and to worry about the things that you can control and to let the rest go. Like there's a lot of that, I think, hopefully, that inspires people, makes them laugh. There may be some tears along the way too. Tears and laugh is like an emotional journey. Yes. Literally is, with this book. And I think it gives a glimpse to the readers, particularly if they're Americans, about Vietnamese family. Yes, absolutely. What do they do? Right. What do they eat? Yes, right? What their family activities look like? The rules. The rules. We love rules. We're Asians. Exactly. And so I really do appreciate that my parents raised me as Vietnamese parents, but I also get to see them evolve and be Vietnamese American grandparents to my daughters. And so like the I love yous and the I'm proud of you and the praise and all of the words I never got of affection, I hear them given typical, to my to their grandchildren. And I appreciate that, because I think we all have to recognize to give our parents grace that they did the best they could with what they had. And that's what we're trying to do too in this generation. Thank you very much for sharing. So folks, this my conversation with Vicky Nguyen. I've I'm glad that we have the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. So the full episodes of Asia Forward podcast can be viewed on YouTube and also Spotify. Please connect with us also in our social media accounts, Instagram and LinkedIn, and also our website, asiaforward.org. Get to know our team and find out how you can also support the podcast. So I'll be looking forward to hear from you, and I'll be looking forward to see you in the next episode of Asia Forward podcast. Bye-bye.